Do you know where my wife is?
Is she downstairs?
She said she'd only be a few minutes.
His wife had been dead for 11 years.
No. That's not right. She wouldn't leave without telling me.
Welcome to Heart and Home, where every story reminds us that kindness, love, and family can change a life forever. Before we begin, we'd love to know, where in the world are you joining us from today? Let us know in the comments below. Wherever you are, we hope your day brings you a little peace, warmth, and something to smile about. Now, let's step into our story. Thomas was already searching for a coat that wasn't there. Marisol glanced toward her housekeeping cart in the hallway. 6 checkout rooms still had to be ready before noon. She could call the front desk, wait for his daughter, and go back to work. Instead, she pulled a chair across from him and sat down. "Okay," she said. "Tell me about Ruth." She thought she was giving a confused old man 10 minutes of her morning. She had no idea those 10 minutes were about to put 6 months of work at risk. The Harbor House Hotel had stood a few blocks from the water for close to 80 years. Brick front gone soft with weather, a lobby with a rug the color of old wine, a grand piano nobody played much anymore. Marisol had worked housekeeping there 6 months, most of the way toward a permanent position, steady pay, real benefits, the kind of stability that meant she could stop doing math in her head every time a bill came due. She lived with her 10-year-old sister Lucia across town. Their mother had died a few years back, and Marisol had been holding things together since, mostly on her own, mostly without asking anyone for help. Thomas Bell wasn't at the Harbor House for a vacation. A pipe had burst in his house that winter, bad enough that the repairs would keep the place unlivable for the foreseeable future, and his daughter Rachel had booked him a room until it was fixed. He'd always been fairly independent, a little forgetful, sure, nothing that had worried anyone enough to hire help. That morning, in room 214, was the first time anyone saw how far it had actually gone. Thomas talked about Ruth for a long time, the kind of long that doesn't announce itself until it's already happened. 10 minutes became almost 45. He grew calmer as he talked, the panic easing out of his shoulders one memory at a time. Then his daughter arrived. Rachel Bell came through the door already moving, phone in one hand, and Thomas looked up at her like a stranger had walked in. "Who was that?" Rachel froze in the doorway. It took her a second too long to find her voice. "Rachel." She swallowed whatever that had cost her and switched, almost instantly, into something more manageable. "Dad, did you take your medication this morning? Did you eat? Do you know what day it is?" Thomas's mild confusion sharpened into irritation. Marisol slipped out quietly, back toward her cart. Rachel arranged for her father to be evaluated that week and hired an aide in the meantime. But Marisol had her own problem waiting in the hallway. 6 checkout rooms still needed to be ready before noon, with 11 more later in the shift. Dana Cole, her supervisor, was waiting by the housekeeping closet when she got there. 52, sharp, not unkind, just tired. "I was helping a guest," Marisol said, before Dana could ask. "You didn't tell me you were leaving your floor for 45 minutes. Dana wasn't raising her voice. That almost made it worse. "You did the right thing staying with him. You did the wrong thing disappearing without a word. I had Priya covering your rooms on top of her own, and I was supposed to sign off on your permanent recommendation this afternoon." Deferred isn't denied, Marisol. "Give me 30 clean days. Talk to me before you vanish. Let me know when something like this comes up, and we'll revisit it." That night, Lucia practiced scales on her little keyboard while Marisol sat with the deferral notice on her phone, reading it twice like it might say something different the second time. "Did you do something wrong?" Lucia asked, not looking up from the keys. "I'm not sure," Marisol said. The next morning, room 214 was on her list again. Thomas looked at her from the chair by the window like he'd never seen her before in his life. "Have we met?" "Yesterday. Was I charming?" "Not particularly." He laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him. Rachel, coming down the hallway with the aide she'd hired that week trailing behind her, stopped and watched them through the half-open door. The aide had spent the last 10 minutes trying to coax Thomas into eating breakfast in a slow, careful voice that made him turn his face to the window every time. Marisol hadn't tried to coax him into anything. She just talked to him like a person. Rachel caught Marisol in the hallway that afternoon. Would she consider spending some time with her father outside her regular shifts? Not medical, nothing official, just company? Rachel would pay her for the hours. I already talked to your manager, Rachel added. She said what you do off the clock is your business. Dana, walking past with an armful of towels, only added, off the clock, you're Marisol. On my clock, I still need you on your floor. Marisol said yes. From then on, she started telling Dana ahead of time when Rachel needed her, swapping the occasional shift with Priya instead of disappearing. She bought a plain notebook from the drugstore and wrote across the first page. Things Thomas remembers. The pages filled slowly, over weeks. Ruth burning the toast nearly every Sunday morning. Rachel's red coat at 7 years old, the one she refused to take off even in July. A dog named Charlie, whose color changed depending on the day. Harbor House itself, it turned out, wasn't just where they'd met. Thomas and Ruth had come back most Valentine's days after, long before either of them thought to ask for 214 by name. One evening Rachel came by late and read through the notebook while Thomas slept. She stopped at a page near the middle. Rachel's red coat. She laughed, soft and surprised. I forgot about that coat. He didn't, Marisol said. Today, Rachel said. The word landed heavier than she meant it to. She admitted, after a silence, that she'd mostly stopped asking her father about the past. Every time he couldn't answer, it felt like losing one more piece of him. Marisol told her, without really planning to, about her own mother, how she'd spent the last months of her life handling things instead of just sitting with her. The bills, the doctors, the paperwork, telling herself she'd finally slowed down once everything was settled. Did things ever settle down? Rachel asked. No, Marisol said. They never do. Neither of them said much else. One Saturday afternoon, Marisol's usual sitter canceled at the last minute, and Rachel told her to just bring Lucia along. Lucia spotted the grand piano in the lobby before she'd even taken off her coat. Do you play? Thomas asked her. Badly. Those are my favorite students. He showed her a few notes. Lucia didn't treat him like someone fragile, and Thomas seemed to relax around her the way people do around anyone who isn't handling them. A week later, he told the story wrong. We had a black dog, he said. No, Lucia said, matter of fact. Yesterday you said he was brown. Did I? Yep. Thomas laughed. Then you'd better remember it for me. Not every visit went that easily. One afternoon, Thomas looked at Lucia like he'd never seen her before. I'm sorry, whose little girl is this? Lucia, Marisol said gently. Thomas studied her a moment. Have we met? Lucia's face did something small and hurt before she caught it. A few minutes later, like nothing had happened, Thomas was showing her a chord again, calling her his favorite student. Lucia laughed along with him, but she was quieter than usual the rest of that afternoon. Rachel mentioned, almost in passing, that Thomas had insisted on 214 specifically, refused every other room the hotel offered when they'd first checked him in. Why 214? Marisol asked. I don't know. He just kept asking for it. It was Lucia, eventually, who put the question to Thomas directly. Why do you always want this room? Because this is my room, Thomas said. But why? He opened his mouth. Nothing came. Marisol found the photograph a few days after that, tucked in an old cigar box among receipts and buttons. Thomas, young, standing beside a woman in front of the Harbor House. On the back, in handwriting gone soft with age, February 14th, the day I found you. She brought it to him. Something in his face changed the moment he saw it. February 14th, 1969. A Valentine's dance, right there in the hotel ballroom. Thomas, 21 years old. Ruth standing near the piano in a dress she'd sewn herself. He'd asked her to dance and stepped on her feet 3 times before the song ended. She should have walked away, he said. But she didn't, Marisol said. No. He smiled at the photograph a moment. Then, the smile went. He looked down at the number on the back of the picture like it belonged to someone else. I knew there was a reason, he said quietly. Not long after, Thomas brought out an old cassette tape he'd found in the same cigar box. The label, faded but legible. R+T, 1978. Rachel offered to get it digitized before anything happened to it. No, Thomas said, sharper than usual. Don't take it anywhere. Rachel let it go. Inside was Thomas's voice, young, and Ruth laughing at something he'd said, and Ruth telling some long story about a neighbor's cat. And then, near the end, Ruth singing a few bars of a melody, low and easy, like she was singing to herself in a kitchen and didn't know anyone was listening. Rachel had been checking her phone. Her lips moved around one note before she caught herself and went still. You know it? Marisol asked. No. Rachel shook her head slowly. Maybe just that one part. It just sounds familiar. Mom used to hum something like that when she cooked. Do you remember the rest? Thomas asked her. No, Rachel said. I don't think I do. Thomas showed Lucia the first few notes on the piano that same afternoon. He'd taught her, a week or two earlier, which buttons did what on the little cassette recorder. Play, stop, record. Mostly just to keep her occupied while he found his photographs. Neither of them thought about it again after that. A few days later, Lucia wanted to record a message for Thomas, something to make him smile, she said. She found the recorder on the side table. She didn't know the tape from the cigar box was still loaded inside it. Thomas had forgotten to take it out. She pressed record. Hi, Mr. Bell. Then she tried humming the melody he'd shown her, over and over, getting it a little wrong each time. By the time Rachel found the recorder and pressed play, the singing near the end of the tape had already been recorded over. Ruth's talking, her laugh, the story about the cat. All of it was still there, clear as ever. But where the song used to be, there was only Lucia's small, off-key humming. Rachel's hands went still around the tape. What did you do? Lucia looked between the recorder and Rachel's face and started to understand. Not just that she'd broken something, but that if Thomas ever forgot the song too, that piece of Ruth might really be gone. Rachel, she didn't know, Marisol said quickly. That was the only recording we had of my mother singing. Rachel's voice was shaking. Thomas came in partway through and heard enough of it. He didn't raise his voice. He just asked quietly, "The song's gone." Rachel nodded. Thomas looked at the tape a long moment and said nothing at all. It was the silence that broke Lucia. She was crying before Marisol got her out the door. "I'm so sorry," Marisol told Rachel. "We'll give you some space." Dana quietly reassigned 214 to Priya for the next few days. No explanation needed beyond. Give them some room. Thomas had good days that week and harder ones. On the good days, he didn't touch the memory book, and nobody was sure if that was grief or just distraction. On the harder days, he forgot why everyone around him seemed so sad, and asked twice why the little piano girl hadn't come by. One evening, Rachel sat with her father. No phone, no medication schedule, no checklist. Just sitting. "Do you remember how your mother sang it?" Thomas asked her. "I think so. I don't know if I do anymore." A pause. "That's what scares me." "Me too," Rachel said. It was the first time either of them had said that fear out loud to anyone, including each other. Across town, Lucia sat at her little keyboard, picking out the melody from memory. She got most of it wrong. She kept trying anyway, quiet, not wanting Marisol to hear. Marisol heard anyway, and stood in the doorway a while, torn. Her first instinct was the old one. Smooth it over, keep her distance, don't make it worse. Then she thought of her mother again, and texted Rachel instead of deciding anything on her own. Lucia remembers part of the song. "I don't know if that helps or just makes it harder. I didn't want to decide for you whether you'd want to hear it." Rachel didn't answer for a long time. Then, "Bring her tomorrow." Dad asked where the piano girl went. Lucia went back to the harbor house the next afternoon, Marisol a step behind her. "Mr. Bell." Her voice was small. "I can't give Mrs. Bell's song back." Thomas didn't say anything, but I think I remember some of it. She sat down at the piano, played the first few notes, got one wrong, stopped, started again. Thomas walked over slowly and sat beside her on the bench. He set his hands on the keys and picked up where she'd left off. They played together for a few bars. Then Thomas stopped, A gap in his memory, the notes just gone. Behind them, Rachel, who'd come in without either of them noticing, began to sing the part that came next, hesitant at first, like she didn't trust it, and then less so. Thomas turned around. Rachel kept singing, tears running freely now, surprised at her own voice as much as anyone. Lucia played. Thomas played. Rachel sang. None of them remembered the whole song. But between the three of them, a few notes here, a few words there, something close to the whole thing came back. Afterward, Thomas held the old cassette in both hands. He didn't throw it away. He picked up a pen and wrote, small, on the underside of the case. Lucia, 2026. Why'd you write my name? Lucia asked. So I remember who was here, Thomas said. Rachel knelt down next to Lucia. I had a right to be sad, she said. But I shouldn't have made you feel like you did it on purpose. I still wish I hadn't done it, Lucia said. So do I. Rachel was quiet a beat. But I don't wish he'd never met you. A few weeks later, spring came in slow the way it does near the water. A little more light in the mornings, buds starting on the trees along the harbor road. Dana had signed off on the permanent position by then. 30 clean days, like she'd said. Marisol hadn't stopped visiting Thomas. She'd just stopped disappearing to do it. She pushed her cart down the second-floor hallway and knocked on 214. Thomas was sitting by the window, same as always. He turned and looked at her. I'm sorry, he said after a moment. Have we met? Marisol glanced at her watch, out of habit, the way she always used to when a minute felt like it was costing her something. Then, she set her things down and sat in the chair across from him anyway. Yes, she said, but it's okay if you don't remember. Thomas waited a moment. What's your name? Marisol. He repeated it, like he was trying it on. Marisol. He studied her face. You don't feel like a stranger. Marisol smiled. She didn't need to say anything back. The door to room 214 stood open a moment behind her, the brass number catching the morning light. 214. Before it swung slowly shut. Maybe memory isn't the only place love lives. Names can disappear. Dates can disappear. Even a song can slip out of reach. And still, something remains. Sometimes we no longer remember who once held our hand. But somewhere inside us, we still remember what it felt like not to be alone. Thank you for spending your time with us today. If this story brought someone to mind, someone you've loved through forgetting, or someone who simply stayed when nothing could be fixed, we'd love to hear about them in the comments below. And if this story touched you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it today, so we can keep spreading a little more kindness together. Until next time, take care of yourself and the people you love.